Hello and welcome to Writers Showcase, brought to you by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. I am your host, author Nola Nash. I am the author of the Crescent City series, which includes both Crescent City Moon and Crescent City Sin. And coming in March, the first book in a new series, Traveler. And I am so excited to be welcoming some folks from Pulp Literature. And you guys are going to have a good time getting to know these guys because I've really been enjoying it, especially chatting with Matthew. Matthew, you've got some really interesting experiences. You've had an interesting life, and I'm excited that I got the chance to kind of hear a little bit about that. And I hope that you'll share some of those stories with us as you're introducing yourself and letting folks get to know you. And then I have the two co-founders of Pulp Literature. We've got Mel and JM down there. So we're going to get to know everyone. So let's see. I know, Matthew, you strike me as the kind of guy that would be a ladies first kind of guy. So I'm going to start down there with Jennifer. Jennifer, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself to the folks, and then we'll get to the others.
Oh, hi. I'm really delighted to be here, and thanks so much for putting us all on the same panel together. We all do lots of podcasts, but we hardly ever get to do them together, so that's really nice. So I'm the managing editor of Pulp Literature, and my partner in crime there, Mel, and I founded Pulp Lit back in 2013 with our other partner, Susan Peters, who was also founding editor. So yeah, it's been going for 8 years now. So I'm also an author. I'm the author of the Elenius Song trilogy, which those are the
Here we go.
first two books right there.
There we go. Now we can see them. I love those covers. They're gorgeous.
Thank you. Those are Melissa Mary Duncan. She's done a lot of covers for, well, she does the covers for me, but she's done the covers for the magazine as well. She did our very first Pulp Literature cover. And she's from New Westminster here. She's amazing. So we tend to use her a fair bit for artwork. Mm-hmm. So Pulp Literature is just a fiction magazine. And we were actually, our acquisitions editor, Jen Wynand, was here this morning, and we were mailing out copies of this. So for our subscribers, you will mail very soon. This is a print proof, so it's all loose bound.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Awesome. Well, Mel, since you kind of go right along with Jennifer on that stuff, I'm going to let you introduce yourself now.
Hi, I'm Mel Anastasiou. I'm a mystery writer and a founding editor with Pulp Literature. And I was just remembering when we got our first proof of that first cover and it's inside. It's all it's quite exciting to see. And that was back in 2013. And we were all writing and looking for some place to publish genre short fiction and finding there wasn't a lot out there. And we thought, we were sitting on my couch on Bowen Island at the time, weren't we, Jen?
Yeah.
Yeah, and with beers. So naturally.
Nice. My kind of conversation.
Anything seemed possible.
Of course.
And thus arose the motto of the magazine that Jen came up with, which is
good books for the price of a beer.
That's right. Good books, price of a beer. Our first thought was good books for a price of a coffee, but we that wouldn't fly as well. Yeah. So we thought, well, we'll see if anybody mails in a story to us, and we got more and more great stories, and we were gobsmacked by the amazing quality of everything that went on. And meanwhile, we're writing up a storm as well. And then we decided to get into publishing novels, which is something that Jen and I were really interested in doing. And lucky for us, Matthew had this amazing book.
Mm-hmm. All right, she's tossing to you over there, Matthew. So I'm going to let you go ahead and
jump in. Okay. Well, I think just at about 50 years now of being a writer for money. I started out as a journalist, and then by a fluke, I was invited to go to Ottawa, the national capital, and ended up as a speechwriter for cabinet ministers. Turned out I had a natural knack for speechwriting. And then I came back to Vancouver and I freelanced for about 30 years until my kids were grown. And then I said, well, now I'm going to do what I always wanted to do, which is to write novels. And that's what I started doing. And then, of course, you can't make a living writing novels. So I, 15 years ago, gave up having a home and became a wandering house sitter. And I've now lived in 12 countries and been around the world, literally circled the world. So I wrote a lot of science fiction and fantasy and crime fiction, but there was this book that I always wanted to write since way back to 1971 when I came across a footnote in a school book in university. And short story is I couldn't write it because I couldn't get the research. It was all in Spanish. But then things changed. Yeah, it was like Spanish academic journals, which, I can say "Donde está la pluma de mi tía," but I can't.
You can say more than I can.
That's where is the pen of my aunt, by the way. Yeah. Anyway, it got to the point where I could actually get research done on this story that I always wanted to write. And so some 40 years later, the Canada Council gave me a big grant, 25 grand. And I sat down and I wrote this book, and I wrote it several drafts, and really it's the book I consider my magnum opus, and I want it to be the thing I'm remembered for, not the science fiction and fantasy, although I like that. And then I looked around for a publisher, and I'd been selling these two guys short stuff for a number of years. It had gone in the magazine. And I said, well, have a look at this. And they said, we love this. And so we made a deal, and they published the book. And it came out in late 2019 and got some good reviews. And I won't say it's a bestseller because life ain't easy, but it's...
Especially now, selling books. I mean, 2019, that's tough. That's a tough,
Well, it's just
something off the ground
before the pandemic started. Yeah. That was a bad thing. And now I'll tell you what the book's about.
Yes,
having done all that prologue. In the middle of the 1500s, some African slaves were being shipped down the west coast of South America from Panama to Lima, and they were shipwrecked on the jungle coast of Ecuador. And they survived, 27 of them, men and women, mostly men. And they moved in on the local indigenous people who were very distressed and had been dying of diseases and so on. And they formed a mixed society. And then, of course, the Spanish, the conquistadors up in Quito, where the capital was, they tried to come down and catch them and take them and put them back into slavery and make them work in mines and stuff until they died. And these people, the Africans and the native people of the area, they fought them off. They outthought them and outfought them.
Nice.
And eventually the Spanish made a deal with them, and they remained free and independent forever. And when I saw that in a footnote, like of a book 40 odd years ago, I said, well, now that's a story. And I can write that someday. And I'm delighted that I got to write it. And then these guys made such a good book out of it.
It is, I can imagine, very difficult to find the research that goes with that. Oftentimes those who are, oppressed, there's very little record of them. And so to find that much information, to be able to take it into a full novel, that is some impressive research. I don't know that people really appreciate how much research goes into a story like that, especially something that's obscure to the point where it's a footnote in something. You don't have a wealth of bibliography to go pull from there.
Yeah, when they were living in the jungle together, nobody was taking notes.
Right.
I had to infer a lot of what happened. And I should, of course, tell you the name of the book.
Yes.
It's called What the Wind Brings.
Oh, what a great.
We've got a cover here.
Do you have it? No, okay, hang on. Let's make that big so we can see it.
There you go.
What a great cover, too. Love that.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
I think
this is the hardcover version.
That's an actual. I think it's an actual painting from the 16 or 1500s by a Dutch artist. So
yeah,
public domain.
Willem van de Velde.
I've heard of him.
Yeah.
That is a fascinating story. And as somebody who, I write paranormal, a lot of, I write all sorts of things, but the series that's out right now is paranormal and it's historical fiction as well. So I do a lot of research. It's based in New Orleans in 1830, and research is key when you're doing those things. And it's interesting how much of history makes its way into genre fiction. So we pull on a lot of things because it's an interesting place to have things happen and to work with them. There's so much cynicism in modern times that sometimes the things that would fly better in history and fantasy are a little more fun than the things that would be kind of jaded and cynical in modern settings. So I enjoy the research process too. I find myself, down rabbit holes all the time when I'm researching. And I love those little gems that you come across. You're like, oh, that's the perfect thing. That's got to go in the book. Or it sends you off an idea for another series or another book. So those are those magic moments in research. And they're phenomenal when you can actually use those and turn them into something else. And to do something that is such an adventure story. And at the same time, what an important story to tell for those people, to allow them to have their story put out there. So I can see why you want that to be your magnum opus. That makes sense.
Well, historical fiction is different because I think it was one of my favorite quotes. There was a novelist called Hartley who wrote the Go-Between, a novel about Victorian England. And his opening sentence was, the past is a foreign country. They do things differently there.
What a great line.
Yeah, quite true.
Very true. Great line. Now, ladies, as you were getting all of this started, I have to admit, I love to read short stories. And as a teacher, I taught a lot of short stories. I loved the craft of short stories, but I'm intimidated as an author to write a short story because I know, and just, I don't know if it's the teacher in me that understands that every single word is important in a short story. And there's something intimidating in that when you sit down to write it. It's like, I have this much space to tell a story that could fill, this many pages. And I have to say that I'm glad that there are people out there like you that embrace these people who have worked so hard to get those short stories written. I think there's a misconception that writing short stories is easier than writing a novel.
Oh, no.
I disagree. I think that is totally not true. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you're not alone in being intimidated by short stories. I've written only a very few short stories in my life. I'm a novelist, and Mel is a novelist as well, although she does manage to condense hers into novellas, which are still not short stories. So, ironically, neither of us write short form very often. Although our co-founder, Susan Peters, did write and does still write a lot of short fiction. But we just love it so much. I love short fiction. I grew up reading fantasy and science fiction. That's where I first read Matt, was in the pages of that magazine. I just love diving into a short story and admiring the craft and the succinctness of it. I wish I could write half as well as most of the authors that we publish, right? So
it's always been one of my you have your list of things like, I want to try that one day and see if I can really do it. And I've let my intimidation stop me, mostly because, like I said, I love to teach short stories. So I'm teaching things, I'm teaching Edgar Allan Poe. I love to write Gothic fiction. That's, I love that genre. I am intimidated because I know I'm going to sit there and compare myself to Poe. And I am no Poe. So the people who actually strike out and do it, and I love the word succinctness because I think that embodies just all of what short fiction really is. It's getting that story told concisely, but without losing any of the setting, the emotion, just that feel that you can create in so few words. I think I'm intimidated with the same reasons that I'm intimidated with poetry, because there's so much value in so few words that it's such a challenge to write. I've had students who wanted to enter a contest that was flash fiction. And you want to talk few words. It was a max of 500 words. And I thought, how do you tell a story in 500 words? And there are people out there that are telling great stories in short form, and I'm in awe of them. And I love the fact that you specialize in genre fiction as well, because it seems like a lot of short stories are not necessarily genre fiction. And that's a pretty great opportunity for those who are interested in that type of writing. Did you find that most of the submissions that came in, as you were working with those authors that were contributing, is this something that they were kind of seeking out? Did you feel like they had a lot of avenue for that? Or was this sort of kind of like, thank God I have a place for this?
Well, there are a few other magazines in Canada that do genre fiction, but they tend to specialize. So there's Mystery Weekly, which is all mystery. There's On Spec and Neopsis, which are all science fiction and fantasy. So we're the only one that mixes it all together, and we do literary fiction as well. And I really like it when an issue has a little bit of everything, because it's like a smorgasbord, or a taster of a flight of beer. Right?
That's a great analogy. Go with your slogan too. And I appreciate that about the magazine. I love that. And oftentimes having that tasting, of course, like with beer or wine, anything that you're going to try in a flight, you may find something that you unexpectedly are drawn to that maybe you hadn't anticipated before, but now that you've had that chance to get a taste of it, now you want more of it. And so by including all of those various things, instead of specializing very solidly on one, like the mysteries, you allow people to discover more than maybe they would have on their own. So I always enjoy that.
That was one of the things we were trying to do, was to get writers out to new audiences by having the cross genre, so that we could have a literary writer who was perhaps then out being read by readers that might not have picked up his or her book or story, but because it's included in this collection. Same with getting Canadian writers out to international readerships, and working with new writers as well.
That's really great. So you have a lot of contributions that are maybe first time published authors that are getting their shot, kind of coming through you guys?
We usually have at least one per issue that is a first time or first or second publication. And we will take one story every issue to really workshop. So if we find a story it's got some promise, but it's maybe not quite ready for prime time, but if we think that the writing is capable and the premise is good and the story is good, we will put a little bit more editorial work into that and polish it up and make it a publishable story. And some of those have ended up being some of my favorites. And it just gives new writers a little bit more support rather than just a yes, no.
And what a great opportunity for that author to have. I mean, how many form rejections have we all had? Yeah. We could wallpaper our offices with them, like Jack London did. That's sort of my whole thing is, if Jack London can wallpaper his office in rejection letters, then I'm doing all right. But, to have that feedback is a truly special thing, especially for someone who's trying to refine their craft. They have this great idea, but it's not necessarily as polished as it could be, as tight as it could be. Now, is that a service that you provide for authors as well, or is that just sort of something that you do for those special stories that you want to help tweak for the issue?
We do have a editorial service, so you can send work in for critique, and we have several editors who will work through and do a critique on a story, and depending on what you want, whether you want a deep edit or just an overview. The price varies, but that is a service that we offer. The other thing we offer, which is really good value, is with our contests. We have 3 fiction contests. We've got the Bumblebee, which is really short, 750 words, the Hummingbird, which is 1,000 words, and then the Raven, which is 2,500 words. They're all fairly short, but you can get critique with your contest entry for an extra $25. So
that's the best $25 anybody's going to spend right there.
So, it is, it's a little bit of a fundraiser for the magazine, but the amount of editorial you get with that is quite a lot of value.
I mean, any feedback is worth the price of admission there, because it's so hard to come by. And, to have that as part of a contest entry, for just adding that little bit, oh my gosh, yes, that's worth it. Go do that, people, and pay that $25. Find it from somewhere. Don't go to Starbucks for a week. I mean, whatever you got to do, get that $25 critique.
Can I throw in a little plug for these guys? They're not good. There's a very prominent critic of genre short fiction called Rich Horton, who writes for Locus magazine, which is the trade magazine of the science fiction and fantasy and horror genres. And in the past year or so, he's noticed pulp literature and has begun to review it in his monthly column, and I think at least 2 or 3 times now. And he refers to it as this increasingly interesting magazine. So
that's high praise. That's awesome.
Yeah, they're getting noticed because the product is different, and also it's very, very good.
Yeah, it is very flattering, because he is starting to read our non-SF and horror stuff as well, because he gave a little nod to The Extra by Mel in the last issue. So
congratulations.
For him to pay attention to a straight up historical mystery is quite something.
Yeah.
Well, you've obviously been working hard and doing something right over there at Pulp Literature. And I encourage folks to go check out their website. I was looking around on the website. There's so much interesting stuff. There's some great titles, as well as the magazine, fascinating things. You can find Matthew's books over there as well. And you all have really, I love that you've embraced something that you loved. It was, I love great projects that have endured, that have come out of those kind of wild hair conversations that are not just, sat down and corporately planned out. It's like, what, this would be fun to do. We should do that. And then even after the beer is gone, you do that, which is fantastic. I love those kinds of projects. So I encourage all of our listeners and viewers to go check out Pulp Literature. Clearly doing something right over there and working with some great authors and those short story writers. Again, those people I am both intimidated by and greatly admire their skill in short story writing. So Pulp Literature is at pulpliterature.com, the website, pulpliterature.com. And are you on social media as well anywhere?
Yep, at Pulp Literature on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.
Excellent. And Matthew, where can they find you?
Well, I'm on Twitter. It's at Hapthorn, HAPTHORN, and I use the same for my Facebook handle.
Excellent.
You can find me there.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you guys so much for joining me tonight for our Writers Showcase. And I've enjoyed getting to know a lot more about pulp literature, even more than I was able to kind of just find on my own. And it's been truly great getting to talk to you all. And Matthew, we're going to have you tell some of your interesting stories that we were talking about pre-show. We'll have to have you back for some of that, because
I'd be happy.
Man has got some adventures to tell too. So it's been a joy getting to meet all 3 of you. And I would love to have you back another time. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for your time as well.
Thank you, Nola.
Thank you, Nola.
All right. We will see you all soon. Thank you for joining us on Writers Showcase.